Welcome to the Sisters-in-Laws podcast, a faith-based podcast that spotlights Black women that replace silence with storytelling around pregnancy and infant loss and infertility. Black women experience miscarriage and stillbirth 4 to 5 times more likely than white women in the United States, according to the CDC and NIH. Whether you've experienced a miscarriage, infant loss, or stillbirth, are trying to conceive, or have an infertility diagnosis, you will learn about resources and strategies to heal, gain clarity, peace, and hope, and find an empowering path forward after loss. I'm your host, Erica M. Freeman, and you'll hear me interview other sisters-in-laws from around the world who have healed from such a painful and traumatic experience, by sharing their testimonies and stories to inspire and help others turn their pain into their purpose. Storytelling is powerful. Storytelling is activism. Storytelling is healing. Now let's get started. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So I would love for you to begin to share a little bit about yourself and what you do.
Okay, so I currently live in Houston, Texas. I work for a local hospital here. I've been a doula for about 4 years. I got my certification under Sisters-in-Laws with the honor of you. Since then, I've just been doing what I felt like God told me to do, which was serve while I wait. But now we are currently 13 weeks pregnant.
Yes. So you got to take us all the way back and really start from the beginning of your motherhood journey. Yeah. And tell us how it has been since you've been in this waiting period. And then we'll go into your fertility journey and everything like that. So take us all the way back, girl. Take us back to the first pregnancy and then talk about your years of waiting.
Okay. So my first pregnancy was in 2016. We got pregnant unexpectedly. I was actually on birth control, but I went and did a yoga that day and I was like, I am winded. So I was like, let me go home and take a pregnancy test to see what's going on with me. And sure enough, it came back positive. And when you call and try and schedule your doctor's appointment, they say, well, you have to wait so many weeks before we can bring you in, which was fine. So during those weeks of waiting for the first OBGYN appointment, I noticed that I was having a lot of cramping, which, people say is normal when those first few weeks of your pregnancy. So I didn't really think nothing of it, but I was like, it's a horrible pain on one side. So by the time we got in to see the doctor, the nurse was doing the ultrasound. My husband is there with his camera to take a video of the ultrasound. The nurse walks out and she comes back in with the doctor and he's like, I don't need to see anything further. He's like, it's an ectopic pregnancy. He was like, we have to terminate the pregnancy immediately. So, of course, we're in shock. I've never heard of an ectopic pregnancy. And he's like, you haven't been in any pain, no excruciating pain. I was like, well, I've been having cramping, but I just thought that was normal. So come to find out, I was actually 12 weeks pregnant with that pregnancy. Yeah. I had no idea I was that far along. He was like, your tubes could burst at any time. He was like, I need for you to calm down. Because, with crying, you're convulsing. He was like, you need to stay still. He was like, because those tubes could burst or the tube could burst. And he was like, you could hemorrhage. So we didn't end up doing the the surgery that day. He ended up having me come back first thing in the morning. We did the surgery. We did it laparoscopically. I think he went through my belly button and another incision on the side, removed that tube. And he was like, the next time you get pregnant, you need to let us know immediately because there's a 70% chance that this could happen again. So I didn't really have any answers. I just assumed that because I had gotten pregnant on birth control, that was maybe the reason why we had the ectopic pregnancy. So go on with life. During that time, doing a bunch of research on how possible is it to actually get pregnant with one tube. I ended up getting pregnant again, maybe about 8 months later. And that's when the anxiety set in. Because I'm calling the doctor's office. By this time, I had a completely different OBGYN. The first one was he was an Indian guy, but I just felt like his bedside manners, it wasn't for me. So I made sure my next OBGYN was a Black OBGYN. It was a doctor here in Houston. She worked on the floor right above me, so she and I already had a relationship. But when I found out I was pregnant that second time, they would not let me in. Like, so I felt like was soon enough. So I'm still having to wait 3 and 4 weeks to get in for them to do an ultrasound. But they're like, if you are not as far along as we need you to be, we're not going to be able to see anything anyways. So that day that I found out I was pregnant with the second baby, I ended up just going to the emergency room. And I was like, can y'all just at least tell me if it's ectopic? Because in my mind, I'm like, I need to do everything I can do to save my second tube. So at the emergency room, they couldn't see anything. So I must not have been that far along. Fast forward, the first OBGYN appointment comes. They're doing the vaginal ultrasound. They could hear the heartbeat, but they couldn't see the baby. So she didn't say anything. She was like, I'm going to send you next door to the hospital to go to radiology so that they can do a more in-depth ultrasound. So we go over there, get next door. The radiologist does the ultrasound. They don't say anything. They just had me go and sit out in the waiting area. By the time my husband had made it there, my two best friends had made it there. Dr. Turner calls me on my cell phone and she's like, it's ectopic. We have to go ahead and remove that second tube immediately. I wailed in the lobby of the hospital because in my mind, that was it. That, like, I wasn't having kids at that point because we had looked into IVF, but the cost of IVF here in Texas, it's about $30,000. And at the time, the hospital that I was working for, they only gave you $500 towards fertility. That's like a drop in the bucket.
That is literally the consultation doctor's appointment.
Okay,
$500 for fertility treatment.
That's not even the medication.
There's nothing, right?
No, it really is just the consultation.
It's your consultation appointment's $500, right?
So, I mean, we ended up doing the surgery immediately. But she told me that this embryo, or I guess this fetus, was not just in my tubes, but it was also in the endometrial. It was endometrial is what she called it. So it was in the corner of my uterus. So she had to cut out the fallopian tube as well as the corner of the uterus. So that surgery was a C-section surgery. Like, I have a whole scar. We had that surgery that same day, went home. Recovery was hell. It was not fun. And I was like, is this what C-sections, like, is this how a C-section goes? She was like, well, no, because we had to cut something out of you. Your recovery is going to be much harder. So I could not.
You literally had a C-section plus a major abdominal surgery because the different with a C-section, they're just cutting all those layers, right? Pulling the baby out. They cut your actual uterus as well as cutting all those layers.
Right.
And then cutting your fallopian tube and everything attached to it. So yeah, that was, oh my goodness.
Right. So I didn't get out of the bed at the hospital for maybe about 2 days. When they were getting ready to release me, it took like one nurse here, my husband in the front, for me to even be able to, I felt like I had a hanger that was just, I'm like, y'all left something in me. But it was not an easy thing for me to even be able to get out of the bed to make it to the restroom. So I just felt defeated and I was like, what's next? We can't afford IVF right now. It almost seems impossible to even try and save for. But I went home. My mother-in-law stayed the whole 6 weeks with me. My husband ended up having to go back to work. But my body started going through changes as if I had a baby. I kept having this pain in my chest. And I kept calling my mom and I was like, I think I either have a blood clot or I'm having a heart attack. I was like, I just keep having this pain in my chest every 2 hours. It wasn't until I was sitting on the toilet about to get in the shower. And I thought the vent was sweating on me. My breasts were lactating. So it just going through the second ectopic pregnancy, going through the surgery, having to deal with the recovery of what it seemed like what I would have gone through had I had a baby. It just, I did end up dealing with a lot of postpartum for several months because I felt like during that time, there was probably like 10 girls pregnant at work. I also had a friend that was found out she was pregnant not too long after that. And it was like nobody's pregnancies were ending in anything tragic. Like it was like nobody for me to relate to. So I felt like, I was like, did somebody do a voodoo on me? Is there a hex on my back? Like, did I do something in my past life? And for it to be me, like I've wanted children since middle school, and I just did not think that would be my story. I do have a daughter she'll be 17 in June, Melly. She's biologically my husband's. I met her when she was 3 years old. So I felt like I had sown seeds. I had raised my brother and my sister. I'm 10 and 12 years older than them. I felt like I was meant to be a mom. So, but it was like after that, I didn't know. At that point, it was like, what is the plan to be able to afford IVF? So that took about 7 years for us to even be able to afford. We started our IVF journey last year, but even before that, during that season of all those girls being pregnant at work, I just asked God to help me to change my heart so that I didn't grow bitter. And it was, I don't know what it was. It was just like something in me just started to like love on them. And it was one girl in particular, Lindsay. She would always come in the office and I would just scratch her belly, or I would get behind her and lift her belly up and she'd be like, you should be a midwife. And I never thought about that. I started researching it, but here in Texas, you have to become a nurse before you can become a midwife. So that's when I found Sisters in Loss. And I immediately enrolled in your program. And my husband was like, do you think you'll be able to handle that? Like being a doula and being in the delivery room with somebody, you can't even go to no baby shower. So how are you going to help somebody get through their pregnancy? I was like, I don't know. I'm just going to do it. Like, I didn't have a reason, but I just felt like it was something that I needed to do then. And I was like, I'm going to just roll with it. I'm going to give myself time to get through the program. And then we'll just see what happens.
So how has it been? How was the doula training towards your healing? And then how has it been really supporting mothers and birthing people since you gotten certified?
I felt like the doula training had a lot of information, as in depth as you go, and the fact that we still have access to those videos, that material. I felt like I was building up to something, but I just didn't know what it was. And it was almost like I started to become obsessed with birth. I bought all the books that you suggested we buy. As much research as I did. If you look at my YouTube, that's all that comes up is how to prevent a C-section or how to get through labor pain. So during that time, I started to become more vocal on my social media about the 2 ectopic pregnancies that I had, IVF, and just being more vocal about just infertility awareness in general, and just what exactly a doula was. And then shortly after that, the pandemic happened. And a lot of people didn't want to have babies at the hospital. So home birth started to become more popular, would you say? And it was almost like more women started to be more intentional about childbirth and being aware of what the mortality rate in Black women actually is. And then I started to become more vocal about it at work. And it was probably a week before my birthday, I booked my first client. Her name was Shakita. And I had been friends with this girl on Facebook for years, but we had never actually had a conversation over the phone. I had never actually met her. I don't even know how we became friends on Facebook, but she reached out to me. We did a consultation, and while we're on the phone, she's like, I don't know what it is about you. She was like, but God is just telling me that you're my doula. And she was like, I felt like that before we even got on the phone. So we booked, and I remember I was sitting on my couch. I had a cup of coffee in my hand, and I got off the phone with her, and I started bawling because I've always felt like God speaks to me through other people. But in that moment, I literally heard him say, serve while you wait, and your pain is not in vain. So it was like, had I not, and I never knew why I had to go through both of those ectopic pregnancies, but I felt like had I not gone through them, I would have never encountered the pregnant girls at work. Lindsay would have never told me what she told me. I would have never done this research. I would have never met you. And it was like, I needed this knowledge, and I needed that pain so that I could be able to empathize and be there for the ladies that I was going to help. I've had 18 ladies. And honey, when I tell you, we all friends.
I know that's the hard part about a doula relationship. For my folks who are listening, like when you get a doula, she's your girl. You're gonna end up probably texting her after your baby's born, helping people with, baby turns 1. I see doula babies that's like 4 or 5. I'm like, oh.
Yes. I've had people come back after their next baby. Even my Shakita, the first lady that I had, she was like, I'm not having no doula if you're not gonna be there. I said, well, friend, I'm in my IVF journey. So I was like, I don't know where I'm going to be. We may be in the hospital together. But it was like every woman that I came in contact with, Erica, when I tell you I could have done the service for free because they poured into me just as much as I poured into them. Shakita in particular, I never really went in depth with everything that I was going through, but it was like, man, God was just talking to her, and she was pouring it into me during the time that she was going through her labor. I was actually in the middle of an IVF trial that my doctor had put me through. So the morning she had her baby, I was headed to my doctor's appointment. That one did not end up in a pregnancy, but it was like, they were my village. And they still are. So even me keeping them like on the first date night when they go out with their husbands after giving birth, I just felt like that was definitely what I needed. And I honestly couldn't be more thankful for you for having this program and pouring into us the way that you have, and just walking in your calling and being obedient. It's been an amazing.
Allow God to speak to you to walk in yours, right? So let's talk about this waiting period, because obviously we know for any fertility challenges that they have, obviously you not having fallopian tubes, and also a part of your uterus being taken out, that definitely makes a challenge into not only conceiving naturally, because that's not a thing. So we know you're gonna have to do fertility treatments, but the biggest barrier for Black people is the financial part of it, right? So let's talk about how you and your husband really saved, prayed through that whole process, and really what it took to get pregnant, and be 13, almost 14 weeks pregnant today.
We ended up getting better insurance, and that insurance gave us an allowance of $25,000 towards fertility. And we actually started this process maybe like 6 months after we bought our first home. So I just knew that I did not want to delay it again. I did my taxes a few months ago, and I just saved all my receipts. So I didn't really know exactly how much we had spent. And every time my mom would ask me, I'd be like, don't ask me that, because I feel like every time somebody asks me, I got to spend more money. So I was like, once I'm pregnant, I'll tell you how much I spent. We ended up spending about $24,000, even after that $25,000 allowance, because there were certain things that the insurance didn't cover. We did genetic testing because we were like, we didn't want to risk doing IVF and transferring an embryo that there was nothing in the there was nothing there. So genetic testing by itself was $4,700. My medications alone were about $8,000. And the crazy part is one of the medications that I needed with insurance, it was $6,000 by itself. If we didn't bill insurance, it was $2,500. I said, how? So even with a lot of the money that we were spending, I wasn't meeting my deductible. Right. So our family chipped in a little bit and we just buckled down. My husband worked a second job, I worked a second job, and we got it done. I don't know how exactly we paid for it and didn't have to sell our house, but nothing ever got cut off. We never missed a payment on anything. The IVF clinic worked with us when they could, but we started the process in January. We did delay it twice by maybe like a month or so because maybe we didn't have all of it at one time. But it took about 15 months for us to get where we are today. So, and just a lot of prayer, a lot of budgeting. I mean, we are both faithful tithers. So we felt like this was God telling us this was a time.
It was time. So I would love for you to go a little bit more into the IVF process. And how was that on your body? Especially going through the hormone process, the egg retrieval, that whole process, especially since you don't have fallopian tubes. I don't know if it's different with people who do or not. And because of all the trauma that already happened to your body from both of those ectopic pregnancies. For those of us who don't know, anytime you do a surgery and you cut your body open, you have scar tissue. And that scar tissue can cause lots of adhesions and a bunch of other issues. So to go back into your body to try to pull out eggs, how did they do that? Did they actually have to go through, did you have to get another surgery? How did that process work?
So I don't know if they would consider a surgery. They didn't have to cut me.
Okay.
So we started the medication. At this point, I don't even remember what the medications are called. So you start the injections in your tummy. I think you do those for about 2 weeks. It's not bad at all. I gave myself the injections. So basically what you're doing is you're making those follicles bigger so that the day of the egg retrieval, they've matured hopefully enough to where that they can extract as many as they can. So on the day of retrieval, I was in so much pain because I would have like 30 eggs on one side, 40 eggs on the other side. So my egg quality was great. We had a lot. I had even asked, I was like, dang, do I have PCOS? Because that's a little bit higher than what normal is. And they was like, no, you just have a lot of eggs. I mean, I'm 32 years old. So they were like, you just have a lot of eggs. So the day of the egg retrieval, I was hunched over because my eggs had gotten so big. So we ended up retrieving 22 eggs. They fertilized them all. We ended up with 7 by the blastocyst phase, day 5, which this part I don't think that I was emotionally prepared for because I have a friend who went through IVF and I remember being with her during this phase, but the numbers were getting to me because I was like, how do we go from 22 to now 7? So that made me feel like, because in my mind, I'm like, well, the only issue I have is I don't have my tubes. Everything else is fine. I don't have fibroids. I don't have cysts. I don't have anything like that. We should be fine, right? And then I also feel like me and my husband felt a sense of entitlement because we were going through IVF and we were putting this money up and we had gone through so much already. Our hearts were really set on a boy. So, so out of those 7, we sent those off for genetic testing. They called me on day 12 to tell me out of the 7, how many did they consider perfect embryos? And it was 3. Out of the 3, they said you have 2 girls, 1 boy. So I was torn. I was like, I feel so ungrateful, but I just feel like that's not what I thought I was going to get. I thought I was going to have all 7. And because that number kept decreasing, my heart was just like, you losing your babies. So,
Oh, that's good. I didn't even, now that when you speak that out loud, I never even equate that as a loss, but it is.
Yes.
It's an unexpected loss, and it's almost like you're grieving that too.
Yes. And I was like, that's not what that is. You don't even know them kids. But my heart was like, I want all 22. Because they're ours. They're mine. They're my husband's. They're ours. And then I'm just like, well, what's wrong with them? Where are they going? Did they not survive? Or so with the 2 girls and the 1 boy, we transferred the boy in October. And of course, you go in, you have to do more shots, but this time you have to do the shots in your bottom to prepare your uterine lining so that embryo sticks. So we went in, did the embryo transfer. You have to wait 14 days before you can go back into the doctor's office to see if that embryo actually took. I just knew it did. The first few days, I was like, it did. I was like, God ain't gonna put us through nothing else. I was like, we didn't got this far. It's in there. But it was like the second week, I felt like my heart knew, because it was like every morning when I would get up to do the injections, I was crying, like bawling. And my husband was like, what's wrong? And I didn't want to tell him that I felt like it didn't take, but that's how I felt. But I didn't want to speak that out loud. I didn't want to be negative, but it was just like, it was just over me. So, went in, did the blood test. They called me later on that day at work. And of course they say the embryo didn't take. So, of course, I'm upset because that was our only boy. And then I'm upset because I don't have any answers. What do you mean it didn't take? I took all the medication on time. I did everything that I needed to do. I was stressed during that time. So I'm wondering if maybe that contributed to it. So my doctor brings us in and she's like, we can do a hysteroscopy, which is when we take the camera in your uterus to see if there's any fibroids or polyps or anything that could have prevented the embryo from taking. She said also at the same time, we can do what we call a mock embryo transfer. She's like, we put you back on the medications for 2 weeks and then we bring you into surgery. We see where your uterine lining is also during that hysteroscopy. She said, and we send that off to the lab and they can tell us what happened and what do we do from here. So while we're in that office, I said, well, what about the other 4 embryos? Because we had 7. She said, well, let me pull them up. So then she just starts to say that, well, some of them didn't fully develop. And she said, you do have 1 mosaic male embryo. And she said, you can use it. She said, I don't really suggest that you use it. She said, well, we would just have to put you through a little bit of counseling with the embryo chronologist so that we can see what chromosome is that baby missing and what kind of quality of life it would be, it would have. So we left that there. We ended up doing the procedure. A week or so after we did the hysteroscopy, she calls me and she's like, we just transferred it a day too early. She's like, there's nothing wrong with you. She was like, we just transferred it a day too early. So my mom was like, we can't get our money back. That's on them. So we waited another month until I started my cycle. This time I started doing acupuncture because I'm also in nursing school. I do carry a lot of stress. So I was like, I need to do whatever it is that I need to do to make sure that I'm going into this next transfer, not stressing, not worrying about anything. So I did acupuncture every week for about a month before the transfer. And I also did it that morning of the transfer. So we transferred the girl, waited the 2 weeks, and then we got the call that it took. But even with that, I started having some bleeding. And then we found out that we had a subchorionic hematoma, which I never even heard of.
Mm-hmm.
So they said it's kind of uncommon. I'm sorry, it's pretty common when you have an IVF transfer,
Mm-hmm.
because it's just a blood clot that sometimes happen due to implantation.
Right.
So it's like PTSD. Every time I go to the bathroom at work, I have blood in my underwear. So I left work twice to head to the doctor to see what's going on, and just praying that it's not a miscarriage. And sure enough, every time I got there, she was doing this and wiggling on the ultrasound. So everything seems to have been fine so far.
And you all have graduated from your fertility clinic back to regular OBGYN.
Right. I had my first OBGYN appointment this past Thursday. But even with that appointment, we got a little bit of some news. The doctor asked me what kind of ectopic pregnancy was my last one, or what kind of surgery did I have to have. And I did tell her, I said, well, it was endometrial. And I explained that I did end up having to have the C-section. So she kind of looked at me, and of course I'm intentional, so I made sure she was a Black OBGYN. She said, I'm gonna highly suggest that you have a C-section.
Yeah. And to be honest with you, I'm gonna doula you on this call.
Please, yeah.
um because of how they cut the uterus when the uterus was not even fully developed, because obviously your uterus, obviously I'm showing my hand if you all are watching, your uterus comes back down to the size of your hand or a little bit smaller once it's fully contracted. But as it grows, we don't know how thin that lining is on what they cut open. Granted, this has been some years now since you had that surgery. What was that surgery? Probably 2018. 2017. Yeah, so it's been a while, but we don't know because your uterus hasn't fully expanded all the way out the way it does during pregnancy. So, to be on the safe side and to give you assurance, and to also plan it out, because this is better. It's also better planned when you have a C-section, that you know exactly when it's going to happen, so you can plan everything around it. And it gives you peace of mind as you continue to navigate through this pregnancy. So I encourage it. Obviously, that's your OBGYN and your husband's decision on what you want to do. But I would encourage it as well, just because I don't want you to try to push and it cause more strain on that part of the uterus that they had. So it's almost like for those who do have C-sections and want to do a VBAC, I'm always cautious to push people in that direction, because I'm just like, what's your outcome? What is the best outcome? Healthy mom, healthy baby, right? Like what's the best outcome? A C-section recovery is a lot, but we can plan for it, right? No different. We can plan for it. We can make sure you have all the support systems in place, that people are there, that you don't have to struggle to get out the bed like you were saying before, because now you have a baby and lactating. Like, we can just plan for it properly, versus on the other side where you stress and strain and you have more hemorrhaging, and then you're in a hospital longer, and then you won't have that bonding time with your baby post a major surgery because of hemorrhaging because of vaginal birth after cesarean. So I would recommend it too. I think that back to just your story, I think that you getting to this place where God continues to speak to you through your clients, and then now you being on this other side, are you going to get a doula on this journey for you as you continue through the pregnancy?
I have one. One of my friends, her name is Robin. I called her I think I called her before I called my husband, when they called me to confirm the pregnancy.
It's like, girl, look, we are not playing with this. We are not playing.
Like
Yes, absolutely. So
I absolutely will. I think I'm going to most definitely use her postpartum.
for sure. Yeah.
So yes, it's a must. It's necessary. So my husband, I just see you walk out here and go see your clients all the time. I read books, but yes, definitely.
Well, we need you to daddy doula. Take the baby while mommy recovers. How about that?
Look, in the grocery store, and he'll start talking about what a doula is. I'm like, are you the doula or am I?
I love it. I absolutely love it.
Yeah.
So I would love for you to leave some encouraging words for the women who are waiting. How they've navigated through and just what healing looks like while you're waiting.
Oh, honestly, I just keep saying trust God. And I know that's hard. And it comes with different emotions and different feelings, but even in the walk of infertility and dealing with loss, grief is not linear. Give yourself grace, give others grace, because people who have not walked this journey, they're ignorant to certain things. And that's not to say harshly, but sometimes when people are giving you encouraging words in your fertility journey, they don't know. And sometimes they don't know what to say. And I dealt with that a lot. I felt like I always wore my heart on my sleeve. But I really had to just tell myself that they don't know. And my husband would say they don't know, but they are encouraging you in a way that they know how. But to those women who are still in the waiting season, I can honestly say just trust God. And in that season, find something, I believe in pouring into people who have what it is that you desire. Yeah.
Oh, that's so good. So good. Because it's like you willed it to you, right? God met you at the desires of your heart because you served that community and you served them so well. So I'm so excited for you. I'm so happy that we are able to do this interview on the other side, and I can't wait till this blessing comes because I already know this girl gonna be spoiled.
Okay.
She gonna be spoiled. All the aunties coming. They like we go take her.
The one that's gonna spoil her the most is my 17-year-old.
Oh, for sure. Yes. And they're gonna have a special bond even with the age difference. So it's gonna be really good. I would love for people to stay in contact with you as you navigate and continue on this pregnancy journey and on the other side of it. So leave your information for folks to stay in contact with you.
Okay.
Well, or if they want to hire you as a doula in the meantime. Yes.
Well, you can always inbox me. My Facebook is Britne, spelled Britne. My middle name, Mariah, and then last name Taylor on Facebook. And my Instagram is Mariah Taylor on Instagram. So I'm open to whoever wants to talk about their journey. I honestly, I get that all the time. I get so many inboxes, a lot of questions. And I'm like, I'm not a doctor. You gotta follow with your OBGYN. But I appreciate those who reach out and trust my judgment.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, sis, for being on the podcast. This has been such a pleasure and a treat. And I'm excited about this pregnancy journey for you.
All right. I'll be in touch. Thank you, Erica.
Yeah. See you later.
All right.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to today's episode. For show notes, go to sistersinloss.com to stay connected with us and join the Sisters in Loss community and receive my weekly newsletter. Please go to sistersinloss.com/newsletter. That is sistersinloss.com/newsletter. Please rate and review this episode, and I will talk to you next week.